It's time for overtime.
Now that's a tourist attraction.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros.
Toughest son of a gun you ever met, man. That Texas gunslinger ain't gonna let nothing get in the way.
With interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking. Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Welcome into overtime. It is a yucky, no good, rainy Tuesday, but we're excited to have you with us here on the air, ESPN Sioux Falls, and we got quite the show for you today as we crank it up in this midweek edition of the show. Headlines and highlights coming up soon. The latest from the NBA, including an Eastern Conference Finals breakdown. Do the Pacers have any chance? Vegas says no, they don't. Not in Game 1. We'll wait and see what the spreads look like Game 3 and 4. But tonight, it looks like Boston all the way, double digits, and it's starting to go up a little further. It opened up around 9.5 or 10 points. It's up to 10.5, bet up to 11 in some places. But the Boston Celtics, a huge favorite in Game 1 tonight. We'll also get you the latest honors coming out of the regular season for the NBA. SDSU Softball season recap with Head Coach Kristina McSweeney. Just guided SDSU on another nice season and a second season at the helm for Kristina McSweeney. Will break down the year, the goals, and what's ahead following the departure of some big players in recent Jackrabbit softball history. NCAA news to round out hour number 1. Is there troubling news ahead for college sports? I certainly think so. We'll dive into a couple situations, including a lawsuit from a big-name quarterback recruit pointed at the University of Florida. We'll dive into that. Get you the latest on Jaden Rashada's recent lawsuit against Florida in regards to NIL promises made, promises broken, and beyond. We'll dive into that at the end of hour number 1. Hour number 2, highlights and headlines. Thomas Lee, our buddy from the Sioux Falls Sports Authority, will swing by to talk about USA curling coming to the Sioux Empire next November for Team USA team trials. You get to meet the Olympians that'll represent this great country of ours on the world stage here in the 605. We'll talk about the planning and the initial stages of getting things going with Team USA and USA curling coming here to the 605. What went into it, what's ahead for the Sioux Falls Sports Authority, including the Sioux Falls Marathon, which looms just a couple months away. Before we know it, it'll be here in mid to late August. The Sioux Falls Marathon, SiouxFallsMarathon.com, of course, put together by the Sioux Falls Sports Authority. Get the latest there and so much more. Thomas Lee, Executive Director of the Sports Authority, swings by at 12:15. 12:30, there's a lot to get to from the National Football League, including a really tough injury for the Denver Broncos. We'll fill you in on that as a youngster on the defensive side goes down with a big injury that could cost him the entirety of the season before it even gets started. And then we'll send you packing on this Tuesday edition of Overtime with the good, the bad, and the ugly. It wasn't just a good game. It was a great Game 7 north of the border last night between Edmonton and Vancouver. Oilers go up early on this goal.
Will send it around. That's going to be picked up by Hyman. Spin move to the inside. Drop pass for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Bouchard thought about a one-timer. Looked for a lane. Let it go. And scored! Evan Bouchard!
It looked like Edmonton would run away with it. 2-0 to score at that point. Vancouver would equalize it 2-2, but ultimately Edmonton hangs on for the 3-2 win and advances in the series.
Rodick blasted. It was tipped into the far corner, and Edmonton has won Game 7, 3-2. The Oilers advance to the Western Conference Final.
Edmonton moving on to face Dallas in Game 1. That series starts on Thursday night, but first Connor McDavid said, hey, this one pretty darn close for comfort.
I knew it was going to be a tight game. I don't think anyone came in here thinking it was going to be some type of cakewalk. It was tight. I thought we did a good job of responding. I thought it was a great time out by Chris to settle everyone down, and from there on out, I thought we had a real solid game.
So the Eastern Conference Finals and Western Conference Finals set in both the NHL and the NBA. Eastern Conference Finals begin tomorrow night in the NHL. Panthers at Rangers, Game 1, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Western Conference Finals loom on Thursday night. Oilers at Stars, Game 1, 7:30 start time on TNT. Tonight, the Eastern Conference Finals in the NBA get underway. Pacers at Celtics, Game 1, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Derek White says, hey, we know what it takes and we're ready to deliver.
You just want to do whatever it takes. I mean, if we got to score 150 to win, then we got to be able to score 150. But I don't see it being like that. I think obviously like they have a great offense, down, but just trying to slow them down.
7 o'clock start time on ESPN. Head coach Rick Carlisle of the Indiana Pacers is aware that it'll be very loud tonight for Game 1.
I just told our team, when you win a Game 7 in Madison Square Garden, you've made history. It's very, very difficult to do. This is the most raucous crowd in the NBA that I've seen. And we're going to Boston, and Boston's up there too. But today, this was really, really, really loud.
7 o'clock start time tonight on ESPN again, and Chris Canty, one of many, saying no excuses for Boston. They have to win this series, and they've got to win it all this year.
If you're the Boston Celtics, you absolutely have to take advantage of this opportunity because no title contender could script up an easier path. It just seems a lot easier than the path that the Denver Nuggets just walked just a year prior. So, yeah, there are no excuses for Boston in terms of being able to get this done.
I got to tell you, there's one excuse in my mind. If we get the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Boston Celtics, I'm not saying this because we're close to home in Minnesota. I like Minnesota a lot in that series. Am I ready to pick them outright right now? Probably not. I need to see what it looks like in the conference finals, but I like Minnesota in that series. I don't think Minnesota's a cakewalk, but if it ends up being Dallas as the team that meets up with Boston, Canty's right. That would be an extraordinarily easy trip to the finals for the Boston Celtics, and they absolutely have no excuses if they don't get it done. Pacers at Celtics, Game 1 tonight, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Wednesday night, tomorrow night, Western Conference Finals, Game 1, Mavericks at Timberwolves, 7:30 jump time on TNT. Major League Baseball finals from yesterday, White Sox and the Toronto Blue Jays tussled north of the border, and Toronto turns away Chicago.
The 2-1. Swinging a fly ball, deep left field. Benintendi looks up. It's gone. Danny Jansen's 5th home run of the season, a 2-run blast, and the Blue Jays extend the lead, 7-3.
9-3 would be the final. White Sox take loss number 34 on the season. Chicago 14-34. That audio courtesy of SN 590. Other finals, Cleveland keeps pace at the top of the AL Central. 3-1 win at home over the Mets. 31-17, the new record for the Guardians. Milwaukee and Miami, heck of a game last night. Extra innings, and the home team walked it off.
The 2-2 pitch that Josh Bell is on its way. There's a swing and a ground ball through the right side, base hit. It's another walk-off winner for the Fish. Their 5th of the season. Bell, his 4th walk-off hit of his career.
3-2 the final in 10 innings. Milwaukee with the loss falls to 27-20. That audio courtesy of WINZ. I don't want to talk about the Minnesota Twins because it ain't pretty. 7 straight losses for Minnesota. 4th loss of the season for Pablo Lopez. They get boat raced and beat up in D.C. 12-3 the final. Nationals on top of the Twins. 24-23 the new record for Minnesota. Other finals, Kansas City. How about a surprise team, not just in the AL Central, but in the American League and across Major League Baseball in general? They win game number 30 on the young season. They're 30-19 with an 8-3 dominant win over division rival Detroit. Other final yesterday of note, St. Louis wins at home against Baltimore 6-3. Today and tonight in Major League Baseball, Mets at Guardians 5:10 leads us off. Brewers at Marlins 5:40. White Sox at Blue Jays also in store. Tigers visit the Royals. Cubs are home to the Braves 6:40 on TBS. Twins and Nationals. Minnesota needs a win in the worst way. 5 o'clock pregame, 5:45 the official start time. Listen right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. WNBA final. Another game does not go the way of the Indiana Fever. They are 0-4 on the season. Caitlin Clark did go for 17 points and got dinged up in the process, but Connecticut stays undefeated 3-0 with an 88-84 road win in Indianapolis. Fever still hunting their first win of the season and of the Caitlin Clark era. They're 0-4. Tonight in the WNBA, Phoenix Mercury visit the Las Vegas Aces. That is a 9 o'clock jump time. And news from the National Football League is all centered around quarterbacks. First things first, big decision looming following this year and in the lead up to this season for the Miami Dolphins in regard to their quarterback.
That is certainly a possibility. I'm sure the Dolphins would love that. But if you're Tua Tagovailoa and your cap number this year is scheduled to be $23+ million, and you're seeing new quarterback deals get done in the $50 million range, why do you want to leave $27+ million on the table? Especially when you have the injury history that he does. Like, to me, if you're Tua, you want to get the deal done as soon as possible. You do not want to go into this season without a contract extension.
Tua is one of many guys with a looming contract situation. You got Dak Prescott, you got Tua, you got Jordan Love thrown in that mix, and also Trevor Lawrence starting to be a guy who's getting a little bit of rumblings about will they or won't they with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's what Shefty had to say on that.
Trevor Lawrence is another one. If I'm him, I'm getting the deal done. I'm doing that deal. Like, his numbers have been good, but they haven't been great. And there's so much money on the table that I want to get the clock started on that next deal when I'm contract extension eligible. I still think, Trevor Lawrence's deal, when all is said and done, will come in and it'll start with a 5 as an annual average. And so to me, I want the clock running on that. And I want to start working towards my next deal. And I want to put that money, and when you're talking about that level of money, in my pocket, lock up my future, and get it taken care of. And Doug Peterson said that deal will get done.
That's ESPN's Adam Schefter on a duo of quarterbacks. How about a trio? We're going to lump in everyone's favorite Aaron Rodgers. Robert Saleh, coach of the Jets, talking about Rodgers' availability so far in OTAs.
For him to push the envelope, continue his rehab, he has no restrictions, and he looks good, man. The arm talent obviously is still there, but it's really just reacclimating to everything, and we're trying a bunch of new stuff too, and it's just trying to evolve within the offense.
Well, how is he doing in terms of, is he taking snaps under center?
He's doing everything.
Work related to handoffs and stuff that maybe he wasn't doing toward the end of last year?
He's doing everything.
He's doing everything indeed. Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, very intriguing team. And right now, I don't know if I'm ready to say they win the AFC East, but I feel like that's a pretty decent bet considering I think Miami's taken a step back. Buffalo is definitely taken a step back, and New England not even on the same playing field as those three teams in that division. Real quick, back to Trevor Lawrence, by the way, in regards to, hey, pay the man, he's pretty darn good. He had a pretty regression-filled season this past year. Went down in completion percentage, went down in total yards, down in touchdowns, up in interceptions. And every metric you look at, Trevor Lawrence got a little bit worse in year 3 than he did in year 2. And that is troubling because he had the Urban Meyer situation to deal with. Then he's got a good, realistically honest head coach this time around with Peterson in town. And it gets a little bit worse. That team falls off. He had some weapons last year, running game back. I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. Lawrence has been pretty good. Number 1 overall pick, though. You need to be great and continue to be that way. Lawrence has had a pretty solid start to his career. 20-30, the record for him. Nearly 12,000 passing yards through 3 seasons. 58 touchdowns to 39 interceptions for the youngster down in Duval County. NASCAR race coming up on Sunday is in Charlotte, 5 o'clock on Fox. PGA Tour Golf is the Charles Schwab Challenge from Fort Worth, Texas, running Thursday through Sunday. And UFL coverage continues. It is the second to last regular season week of action coming up this weekend. Saturday it starts. The St. Louis Battlehawks recently clinched a playoff berth. They're in Arlington matching up with the Renegades. 11 o'clock start on ABC. Now into your Reliabank headlines of the day for hour number 1. 7-seeded Augustana lost on Sunday afternoon to 2-seed UT Tyler on the softball diamond by the score of 2-1 in extras. The Vikings opened up the scoring, but UT Tyler answered back and scored the winning run in extras. Augustana will play its next game in a double elimination tournament coming up On Tuesday, Augie takes on Wilmington today at 12:30. They get the opponent. Yesterday, the opponent was to be determined, but it is Wilmington at 12:30. If Augustana wins, they play again at 5:30. Follow along for local coverage and Augie coverage. GoAugie.com/live. South Dakota State outfielder Cale Frost was named the Summit League Player of the Year and Newcomer of the Year as well today, as league officials announced the 2024 All-League Baseball teams and individual award winners. Frost became the first Jackrabbit in program history to garner the league's top accolade, while Oral Roberts right-hander Jacob Hall became the fourth straight Golden Eagle to collect the Pitcher of the Year honor. In his first season in Brookings, Frost batted .321 in 28 Summit League starts, mashing a league-leading 13 homers and finishing second in the league with 33 RBI. The Gilbertville, Iowa native also led the league with 35 runs and 82 total bases. Player of the Year, Cale Frost of South Dakota State. Pitcher of the Year, Jacob Hall of Oral Roberts. Frost also won the Newcomer of the Year award. Defensive Player of the Year went to Omaha's Matt Gatesman, and the Coach of the Year, Evan Porter of Omaha. Those full lists available at thesummitleague.org. Moving forward with your Reliabank headlines of the day, the Minnesota Twins are in trouble, so much so that we've got a players-only meeting. 8 days ago, the Minnesota Twins were baseball's hottest team and had won 17 of their last 20. After last night's embarrassing 12-3 loss to the Nationals, the same club is mired in a current 7-game losing streak, so miserable that it sparked the team to call a players-only meeting. It's easy to be a fun guy around when things are going good and when everything you're hitting is falling and you're just winning games, Twins shortstop and two-time All-Star Carlos Correa said, but when the tough times come, that's when you know who people are, and it's helpful to talk. Correa hit a 2-run homer, the lone bright spot in another sluggish outing for an offense that has been the primary culprit, scoring only 12 runs during Minnesota's free fall to within a game of 500 once again. Against soft-tossing Nats starter Mitchell Parker, manager Rocco Baldelli said the Twins simply weren't reacting last night. And again, tremendously disappointing for the Minnesota Twins. 7 straight losses. We were singing their praises when they got a double-digit winning streak earlier in the season. It's been a year of up and downs. It's been more down than up early, more up than down middle, and now a lot more down lately in this early portion of the season. Still not yet to Memorial Day. Hopefully the Twins can be above 500 when the holiday rolls around on Monday, but Minnesota in some trouble. They face off with Washington once again, 5 o'clock pregame and a 5:45 start time. Listen to the Twins, as always, right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. In case you're wanting to overreact, Justin Jefferson, who's been in talks with the Minnesota Vikings regarding a contract extension, was not spotted at the team's training facility on Monday for the start of offseason training activities. Team sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter. Jefferson also didn't participate in the earlier portion of the Vikings offseason program, which, like OTAs, is voluntary. And why the heck would you participate at all if you're looking for a contract extension? Not worth the injury risks, not worth the risks associated with even being in the building. I don't understand why this is necessarily newsworthy, and I'll tell you, as somebody that would be thrilled if the Minnesota Vikings let a generationally talented wide receiver get out of their grasp, leave the team, or demand a trade, whatever it might be, this is going to get done. It's a matter of time. Everybody's got great positive things to say all the way around. Justin Jefferson in the past had said, hey, I don't really care about money that much. Then he kind of turned around and said, hey, I'm looking to break the bank, as he should. Justin Jefferson, the deal with the Vikings will get done. No reason to panic, but it's worth noting he was not at OTAs for the start of OTAs yesterday. With a slightly fading voice and a ticket to the Western Conference Finals in his hand, Connor McDavid said what many were surely thinking about his team's latest performance. We know how to make it stressful, McDavid told Sportsnet last night. McDavid and the Oilers saw their 3-goal lead come under threat late in the third, with the Canucks scoring twice. And even with those goals, the Oilers held firm in a 3-2 win last night in Game 7 of their second-round series. Now the Oilers will travel to Dallas, where they'll face off with the Stars in the conference final for the right to advance to the Stanley Cup final. For the Oilers, this will be their second trip to the conference final in the past 3 years, while the Stars are making a consecutive appearance. And all sorts of storylines ahead for the Eastern Conference, Western Conference finals of both the NBA and the NHL. But it will be the Edmonton Oilers, not the Vancouver Canucks moving forward into the next round. And one news item we didn't get to from the NHL yesterday as we finish up your Reliabank headlines of the day. The Carolina Hurricanes, as expected, have re-signed Coach Rod Brind'Amour and his staff to multi-year contracts, keeping one of the best in the NHL behind the bench in Raleigh for the long term. The team announced the re-signings on Sunday for Brind'Amour, assistants Jeff Daniels and Tim Gleason, goaltending coach Paul Schoenfelder, and video coach Chris Huffine as well. Rod has been instrumental to the success we've had over the last 6 years. Team president and GM Don Waddell said ever since he joined the organization 24 years ago as a player, Rod has embodied what it means to be a Hurricane. We hope to keep him a Cane for life. Brind'Amour was, believe it or not, this doesn't happen in sports all that often. Brind'Amour was in his final year of a deal reached back in 2021 in the postseason, playing pretty well, but had his back against the wall contract year. You don't see that very often for a playoff team, very successful team like the Hurricanes, but Brind'Amour and his staff re-signed to multi-year contract extensions, all sorts of pats on the back, and a continuation of some success in one of the more successful, if not the most successful, warm weather hockey home in the NHL. Those are your Reliabank headlines of the day for hour number 1. When we come back, we'll dip our toe in to the latest from the NBA. We'll preview the Eastern Conference Final Game 1 tonight just a bit, get you the latest spread, score total, and more. Before long, we talking SDSU Softball, recapping another successful season for the Jackrabbits on the softball diamond with second-year, now third-year head coach Kristina McSweeney. That's coming up next on this Tuesday edition of Overtime.
You want more of Overtime? It's all on the podcast. Free with the app or online at ESPN Sioux Falls. Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Right back with you on this Tuesday edition of Overtime. Thanks so much for tuning us in, as always, right here on your Sioux Falls sports leader, ESPN 102.3, AM 1000, KSOO. Broader basketball news before we dive headfirst into tonight's Eastern Conference Finals Game 1. Defending champion South Carolina women's basketball has another splashy opening plan for next year. The Gamecocks will take on the Michigan Wolverines at the Hall of Fame Series in Las Vegas on November 4th to tip off the season. 1 year ago, South Carolina began its undefeated championship season by taking down Notre Dame in Paris. The game will be the first between the Gamecocks and Wolverines since 1995. South Carolina leads that all-time series 3-0. The win over Notre Dame last season began a perfect run for USC, who finished 38-0 to become just the 10th undefeated champions in the history of women's basketball. There will also be a men's game to tip off the season. Las Vegas doubleheader. That'll be Texas and Ohio State to start out the season November 4th, the tip-off date for those games. As if the massive expectations and brutal opening schedule weren't significant enough challenges for Caitlin Clark to start her WNBA career, she faced another culprit last night, her left ankle. The Indiana Fever rookie and number 1 draft pick, who'd been the subject of unrelenting defensive focus while transitioning to the pro game, rolled her ankle in the second quarter of the Fever's loss to the Sun last night, an injury that left Clark sprawled on the court and clutching her ankle in pain. Clark was unable to get her feet unassisted and limped to the locker room immediately after being helped up. A sellout home crowd at Gainbridge Fieldhouse fell silent as Clark's teammates surrounded her. Meanwhile, her coach held her breath. "I was worried," Indiana's Christine Side said, "a lot." And it was this latest in a series of obstacles for Clark and the Indiana Fever. 0-4 start to the season. Hoping for the best for Caitlin Clark, and of course we'll pass along any updates on that ankle injury. The San Antonio Spurs' Victor Wembanyama was a unanimous selection for the NBA's all-rookie team this year. The league revealed the team yesterday. It was also no surprise given that Wembanyama also was the unanimous choice of rookie for the year for the the same panel of 99 voters who cast ballots for the league's awards this season. Joining Wembanyama on the first team were Oklahoma City Thunder's Chet Holmgren, Charlotte Hornets' Brandon Miller, Miami Heat's Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Golden State Warriors' Brandon Podziemski. Holmgren, the runner-up for Wembanyama in the Rookie of the Year race, was also a unanimous first-team choice. And again, only 5 rookies have made all-defense. Tim Duncan, Robinson, Washington's Manute Ball, Houston's Hakeem Olajuwon, and the Milwaukee Bucks' Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. A lot of those greats in the past, and now Wembanyama looking to make All-NBA. He would be the 22nd rookie to do so in its history, and of those, only 4 have done it in the past 45 years. Big names: Tim Duncan, David Robinson, Chicago Bulls' Michael Jordan, and some guy named Larry Bird with the Boston Celtics. Speaking of those Boston Celtics, in the old days, whenever the Celtics neared an NBA title, the march to the championship was accompanied by the arrogant, befitting to a dynasty, complete with the requisite accoutrements: victory cigar, opponents expecting to lose on the floor, as well as expectations that come with the specter of 17 championship banners looking down and always expecting company. The old days in Boston are exactly that, though now they haven't won a title in 15 years, back to the 2008 team with Kevin Garnett, and is the only one to hoist a banner over the past 37 years. Still, though, in mind, memory, and the trophy case, they are the Boston Celtics, and they have backed up a dominant 64-win season, the 4th best in team history, with a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals for the 3rd consecutive season, something Boston hasn't done since Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale did it 5 years ago. Great write-up at ESPN.com, penned by Howard Bryant on the Boston Celtics. 3 times this year: November against the Pacers, February against the Nets, and in early March against Golden State. The Celtics won by at least 50 points, but Bryant notes here in the article, for an obvious juggernaut that was picked to win the NBA title since before Thanksgiving, no one seems particularly happy in Boston. The star Jason Tatum dismisses criticism of the Celtics as proof of an impatient society only happy when it's mad, whether the subject is Boston's three-point volume, its toughness, or his timeout usage. Joe Mazzulla, the Celtics' overly defensive second-year head coach, wears the annoyed countenance of a man offended that he dared to be asked any questions at all. Great write-up. Howard Bryant, ESPN senior writer at ESPN.com. It does feel like the Boston Celtics are tremendously unsatisfied and tremendously underappreciated, underrated right now. I don't know if it's because what the Minnesota Timberwolves just did was just plain and simply impressive and obnoxious, and they're so darn fun nationally and locally and regionally. I don't know if it's the Timberwolves overshadowing them, or it's just Boston doing exactly what we expect them to do, and what we expect them to do next might not be so pretty, because since 2008, no titles, 3 consecutive Eastern Conference Finals appearances, no titles. But they're a 10-point favorite in Game 1 tonight. The Indiana Pacers roll into town, and Indiana did what many thought was impossible, taking down the New York Knicks. Hostile environment in Game 7. They wear that team down. They wear themselves down as well. The Knicks had a tremendous amount of injuries, but Indiana is on to the Eastern Conference Finals. Boston dropped just 1 game in their first 2 series. Both of those were Game 2s on their home floor. I think they handle business tonight. Give me Boston minus 10. That's the spread right now. It's been moving up and down, left and right all day long. Pacers and Celtics, DraftKings Sportsbook, 10-point favorite right now for the Boston Celtics. We take the break, come back talking SDSU Softball, recapping another great season for the Jackrabbits on the softball diamond. Head Coach Kristina McSweeney joins us next on Overtime.
Stream us online. Streaming now. Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO. Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It is the Tuesday edition of Overtime. Thanks so much for being with us right here on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO. We got some baseball seasons keeping on moving. Softball seasons advancing towards the D2, D1 College World Series. And of course, this time of year, we got some seasons coming to a close and time to recap and look back on the season that was for South Dakota State Jackrabbit softball with head coach Kristina McSweeney. Just wrapped up year number 2 guiding this program, believe it or not. 33-22, the overall record. Coach, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to talk about our season.
I'm excited as well, and it's really tough because at the end of the year, of course, it's tough to lose and be done for the year, but you got to say so long to such great athletes and people within the program and sometimes even coaches as well. Let's talk about the year 33-22, the finish overall. Looking back, what are some big positives for your team this year and in year number 2 for you guiding the team?
Some of the things that kind of stand out, especially for this year, our offensive numbers obviously this year were significantly better than they had been the year past. So we were excited to see a lot of growth with our offense throughout the year, scoring more runs, striking out less, some of the things that I had talked about early on us improving. I think some shining stars too. We had a big win against Minnesota, a big win against Arkansas this year. So 2 big Power 5 wins and, exposing our younger players to the strength of schedule that we had this year. Of the teams that are making a super regional, we've played quite a bit of them. So I think getting that exposure early for our younger players is good. Just having them exposed to that top tier pitching and getting them ready for what's to come definitely stood out. Again, our pitching was dominant. Tori Kanishi had another monster year. So just seeing our players kind of succeed this year and do better than they had in the years past is amazing.
And obviously another fun year for you guiding the program. All sorts of growth there. 33-22, the final mark for SDSU Softball. Talking with Head Coach Kristina McSweeney. When it comes to the Summit League tournament, obviously very competitive. You guys were dominant during the regular season portion of the schedule, finishing 14-2 in conference play. Those only 2 losses, of course, came at the hands of Omaha towards the end of the year. And then the Mavericks get the better of you in that winner's bracket of the Summit League Softball Championship. They went on a nice little run in the postseason as well. Talk to us about the Summit League this year, the quality of the league as it continues to get better year in and year out.
That's such a great point that you brought up, and we were so excited to win that regular season again. But the Summit League has just improved, and as everybody saw this past weekend, Omaha made that big run. It just goes to show you how good mid-major softball has turned into, competing against the best of the best, Omaha knocking off Washington, and taking one from Mizzou. So, they're a quality club and they did get the better of us in the Summit League tournament, but the quality of opponent in the Summit League and the improvements that everybody has made throughout the league is making it just that much more of a competitive league. And that's what we want. We want better teams and better opponents for everybody to get better. So it's exciting to see that and to see in the direction that the Summit League is going. But yeah, that conference tournament at the end, you got to get lucky. Things have to go your way. And unfortunately, it just did not for us. The Mavericks did get the better of us. But again, a lot of experience, good things that we're taking away from that tournament. 2 of our freshman pitchers got several innings in both those games, and they were dominant. I mean, one gave up 1 run over 3 innings, and the other one gave up none. So we're excited about the future of our program, that's for sure.
And I'm excited to talk to you and continue to talk to you about Jackrabbit softball. When it comes to the schedule, you mentioned the non-conference, the games against Minnesota, the scheduled games that ended up not happening against Wisconsin, but also the Arkansas of the world. You also saw Missouri this year and a couple other big ranked opponents, Oklahoma State. When it comes to building the schedule moving forward, for those fans out there wondering if more games like that are on the way or even more, what's an ideal number, or is it as many as you can get the games against these top-tier teams?
There's a strategic way to thinking about it. But for us, you got to play a couple of them to at least get that experience and understand some of the things that you need to work on in high-level, high-pressure situations. So there's not a magic number for us, but we try to play 5 or 6 of those opponents to be able to, A, get them on our schedule to work on our RBI, and B, to get that experience. So for us, we anticipate next year playing a good handful of them, just bigger ones. We're anticipating playing Nebraska, anticipate playing Minnesota and Wisconsin, and looking at possibly playing Missouri again. So, looking in the future, it's trying to get to a point where we can play a majority of them and compete with them. It's all about getting better and not being afraid of playing that Power 5 opponent.
33-22, the overall finish for SDSU softball. Head Coach Kristina McSweeney, our guest here, recapping the season. Talked about it off the jump about the seniors and those using up their final eligibility, as well as departures, whether it be transfer portal or just expiration of eligibility. Who departs the program this offseason? I know there's a lot of big names here.
Oh, yeah. We had a very big senior class. We had 9 of them. You can't talk about Jackrabbit softball for the last 4 years and not talk about those kids. But, sad to see, obviously, Tori Kanishi is going to go down as one of the greatest Jackrabbits I've ever to come through this program. So, we're losing her, Sioux Falls kids, Cheyenne Masterson and Emma Osmondson, true and true Jackrabbits. They're going to be missed completely. Lindsay Culver, the Carrillo sisters, Jocelyn and Rosalind, Tori Charleston, Alexa Williams, and Shannon Lacey. They were just forces for us, that experience that they had playing for 4 years here, and most of them were 4-year starters. Alexa and Shannon were transfer portal kids that came in. But, that experience of their success is going to be so missed for us. But, with them exiting, we're excited to put new faces out there and see if we can continue to build on the legacy that those 9 have left here for sure.
Coach, obviously it's a big group of young ladies and moving on to the next in their careers that departs the program this offseason, but build the excitement with us a little bit because it's a really rock-solid program. You got all sorts of faces coming back for more. Who are a few of the headliners that'll be leaders next year early and often for you?
Well, we returned Mia Jarecki, the Player of the Year for the Summit League, which, as a second baseman and power hitter for us, she's been leadoff. I think we anticipate her hitting more in an RBI fashion for us next year, probably in that 3-4 spot. Brooke Dumont was another first-team All-Summit League player. Will come back. She caught a majority of our games this year. We anticipate her catching and playing third base for us again this coming year. So having the 2 of them come back, Allie Boyle was a staple at the 7-hole for us at first base. She comes back, will be a big name for us. Kayla Bernard got hurt in the middle of our season, but early she was hitting 2 for us through the entire preseason. Battled an injury with an issue with snow and ice here in Brookings that kind of held her back, but we're excited to have her back. She'll take a majority of the time in the circle. And Haley Herman had some really big outings for us and did a fantastic job in the circle for us as well. So we're excited about those couple names. Kids that got time, Abby Gentry coming back. We anticipate her getting some time at third base and some time behind the dish. And Maddie Coughlin was our designated player, and she comes back. So departing on some, but also a really good nucleus of kids that will be coming back and giving us a really fresh look. So I'm excited about it.
Very exciting future indeed for South Dakota State softball. Before we let you go, Coach, for the off season, I wanted to pick your brain about how you personally attack things. Are you taking some time off? Are you kind of glued to the area softball scene at the high school level? Do you go over to Iowa? What's the plan for you this off season, and how do you attack things?
Well, thankfully before this dead period that's coming up, I'll get to watch some South Dakota high school softball. So I'll probably be out tonight if there's any games with the weather going. Tonight and tomorrow, going to hit up Minnesota high school, the end of their high school season. So we're going to try to get those 2 areas kind of locked in before this dead period. Then during that dead period, I remember what it's like to be a mom and hang out with my children and my husband. So I'll get a couple of days to kind of be at home and do some things with my family. And then heavy into that recruiting season, we will open up our recruiting in Kansas City at the Top Gun Top Club event in Kansas City. And then we'll work our way through the summer. So we're going to finish up our 25 class and start working on our 26 class and just start getting some names down for sure. But going through that summer recruiting, we'll be at the big headliner tournaments, Colorado, Alliance, CGF. So we've got our schedule and we're ready to get to it and start building for the future and looking forward to some new Jackrabbit faces for sure.
Well, I know everybody's very appreciative of all the work that you've been able to do in your first couple years on the job. That's South Dakota State softball head coach Kristina McSweeney. Enjoy the off season. Get some family time. We'll talk to you again here soon, Coach. Thanks so much for everything all year long.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me. And as always, go Jack.
All right, South Dakota State softball head coach Kristina McSweeney already through 2 years on the job. Year number 3 is right out in front of her. All sorts of recruiting. South Dakota State softball in full swing. You got Iowa next door with the Iowa softball championships from Fort Dodge coming up. Minnesota, Colorado. You heard she's dotting the map, and also might be maybe just maybe taking some personal time, hanging out with her kids and her husband and her family this offseason for head coach Kristina McSweeney. 33-22. The final mark on the season for SDSU softball, 14-2 in conference, 7-2 at home, and a mixed bag on the road, but also neutral sites, 13-7. Saw all sorts of marquee programs. They got out with a big, huge win at Fresno State, 20-8 in 6 innings in the opener. Also faced off with Missouri a couple times. They saw Oklahoma State twice, Arkansas. They saw Duke, and all sorts of great programs. And she said, hey, there is some rhyme and reason and some strategy in regards to scheduling these marquee opponents, but again, that is going to stay into the future because it's simply too good of an opportunity to pass up as far as experience goes that pays dividends down the stretch of the season. Final record for SDSU softball this year, 33-22. We get it geared up for more coming up next season, but that'll do it for our coverage of South Dakota State softball for now. We'll check in with Coach McSweeney as next season draws closer. We're going to take the break, come back and talk about NCAA college sports. Couple interesting articles up right now at ESPN.com to break down. That is how we will round out our number 1. It's coming up next on this Tuesday edition of Overtime.
Don't miss a moment of local college and pro sports action. Stay connected and download the app for Overtime on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Moving right along on this Tuesday edition of Overtime. You ever miss any of the show? Podcast links are easily locatable at ESPNSiouxFalls.com or on that free ESPN Sioux Falls app. Now for college sports news. After going nearly 3 decades without selling out their season tickets, the Colorado football program announced that their season tickets have sold out for a second consecutive year. Selling out of season tickets for the second year in a row shows how strong our fan base is and the continued impact of and trust in Coach Prime. That's according to Colorado Athletic Director Rick George in a statement. We're ready for an exciting 2024 season and expect a full house for every game for the second straight season. Before Dion was hired as the head coach, the Buffs had not sold out their season tickets since 1996, the final year in a 7-year streak that began with the program's national title in 1990. Colorado has never sold out its season tickets prior to August until last year, and the Buffs returned to the Big 12 in 2024 after spending the past 13 years as part of the Pac-12. Buffs went 4-8 last year in Sanders' season debut and faded after a 3-0 start to finish in last place in the conference at 1-8. The Buffs opened the season at home and, in my opinion, will open with a loss against North Dakota State on August 29th. You heard it here first. Now this article is out at ESPN.com, and I got an update as of minutes ago on Twitter on this payout and settlement. Here's what we got from the college sports world. As the NCAA continues to make steps toward the expected settlement of the landmark House versus NCAA lawsuit and other related antitrust cases, there's pushback on how the NCAA plans to pay the expected $2.7 billion in back damages over the next decade, according to sources telling ESPN. The NCAA sent out a 4-page memo to all 32 D1 conferences last week detailing how the organization plans to cut back on distribution to leagues in 6 annual payout categories and pay the proposed $2.7 billion in damages. The memo detailed how the NCAA could split up the expected $1.6 billion that could come from reductions in NCAA distribution, according to ESPN, and that remaining $1.1 billion is expected to come from NCAA reserves, catastrophic insurance, new revenue, and budget cuts. But of the $1.6 billion, get a load of this, and I think this is just plain and simply wrong, in all caps and underline. Of the $1.6 billion that the conferences are going to pull together and take from their budgets and pay into this lawsuit settlement, 60% is expected to come from leagues outside of the Power Five that are named in the House lawsuit. The other 40% would come from the power conferences. For example, the cost annually for the Big East is projected between $5.4 million and $6.6 million per year over the next decade. The West Coast Conference, another successful basketball-centric league, is expected to annually pay between $3.5 million and $4.3 million. The lowest level of annual payouts expected to be withheld for smaller leagues is just under $2 million. They are planning on backing off D2 and D3. But man, they're going to really pick the pockets of everyone for 60% of the payout from the non-Power Five, and they're only hitting the big boys that got us into this mess and continue to bear the fruits of all of this labor and have for the longest time. They got the biggest stage, the biggest revenue, the best players, and they're only paying 40%. How about pay your fair share? Ross Dellinger on Twitter noting this as of a half hour ago, despite pushback from non-FBS conferences, the NCAA Board of Directors has approved the recommended funding plan to finance roughly $2.8 billion in settlement damages. Expected initial 10-year funding plan, the NCAA National Office will pay 41% or $1.1 billion. The schools will pay 59% in distribution reduction. And of the school distribution, just as they said in that article I just read, Power 5 is responsible for only 40%. And the 27 other leagues will pay 60%. I get it's a lot more schools, it's a lot more opportunities, a lot more pockets to pick. But as far as the conferences that benefit the most out of recruiting, out of NIL, out of lack of NIL for 10, 20, 30 years is what this is all about in the first place, the Power 5 should pay more than half of this. If not 60 to 70%, but they're going to tax the little guys, and I don't think that's right as far as this settlement goes. Again, still in flux, not tremendously official just yet, but it is expected to go that way for the little guys to pay 60% and the Power 5 conferences and schools therein to pay just 40% of this settlement of that NCAA versus House lawsuit. Now, another interesting situation, this emerging this morning from the University of Florida. Former University of Florida football recruit, note that, not a football player, but football recruit, Jaden Rashada, is suing the coach at Florida, Billy Napier, along with a big-time Gator booster and others, claiming that they defrauded him out of millions of dollars by backing out of a promised $13.85 million agreement after the quarterback had turned down offers tied to other programs. The lawsuit filed today includes an allegation that Rashada signed his national letter of intent to Florida on December 21st of 2022, less than an hour after Napier promised the player's father a $1 million partial payment that day upon signing. Rashada never received the $1 million, and the boosters never fulfilled the deal, according to the lawsuit. Rashada is the first known college athlete to sue his coach or booster due to a dispute in NIL. His case, filed in the U.S. District Court in Northern District of Florida, comes during a tumultuous time for the relatively new NIL market for college athletes. A mixture of state laws and evolving NCAA guidance dictates the roles that coaches, schools, and donor groups known as collectives all play in facilitating the deals athletes can now strike to make money. I got to tell you one thing on this NIL stuff. When we got into the early stages of talking about it, what if we could pay athletes? What if we could give them deals for NCAA video games, for jersey sales, for merch sales, for autograph sessions, whatever it might be? What if we could do that? Hey, we'll just shine the light on it. Everything will come to light. It'll be just like it was before, but we'll see everything. Handshake agreements will now become contracts, and no, it won't. We're not there yet. This is all still so sketchy and so disorganized. And the NIL right now, this is going to blow up in a bad way for Rashada, and he's going to probably win this thing. Promised $13.85 million and didn't get anything for it. It all fell through in a handshake agreement. And again, the contracts need to be signed. It needs to go to court. We'll see how it shakes. But again, this is a tadpole. It's going to get its legs. It's going to start hopping. It's going to start eating flies sometime soon because this thing's going to evolve and evolve and evolve. More regulation will be on the way and more detail and accounting on the way, not just for the university and the player, but the collectives, the boosters, anyone involved in getting these marquee recruits to come play at their university. But Jaden Rashada suing the coach, boosters, and the university over potential defrauding of millions of dollars. He's got a new home at Georgia. But again, very ugly situation there for Florida, for NCAA college athletes, and the evolution of name, image, and likeness profitability. We take the break, come back, highlights and headlines next on the Tuesday edition of Overtime.